And when I was looking around the internet, including YouTube, I couldn't find anywhere where anyone would show me how to dial in an underquilt to a hammock. I'm going to give you a quick 3-step way. At least I use this method. So 3 steps. I'll go through the steps now, so when we get there we can get straight into it. Step 1 is the lift of the underquilt. Step 2, what I need is to adjust the actual quilt on the line to position it how far down the head and foot end I want it. Step 3, all I need to do is lock it off. Actually quite boggy here, which I never noticed the other week. Right then, where can we go? Now, one thing I'm not going to do here is pretend that I'm any kind of expert in putting on an underquilt. But I do know enough from my own mistakes that I've made in the past that I've learned from. And if it stops you making the same kind of mistakes that I've made, this job is going to get a whole lot easier. A whole lot easier. People who put on underquilts, they make it look easy, and when you try it, it doesn't always work. So 3 steps, let's break it down. I'm going to throw the line pretty high up the tree for the hammock. A gate on the top, gate on the bottom. Now the underquilt I'm fitting is a goose down underquilt, and it needs to be really, really tight onto your body. If you're using a synthetic underquilt, you're gonna not need quite that much stretch against you. It's not a big deal fitting an underquilt, but it's always best that it's done properly right from the beginning. I'm going to attach it via the little beaners on each end. My quilt, little 8-foot hammock, the principle would be the same. In here is my summer quilt, 20 degree from Hammock Gear, argon shell. I've just noticed I've some coffee left over from another camp, so once I've done this I'm having a brew. Now on my quilt it is modified with a separate left and right. It used to be joined up. I got a knife, I cut it, and I've connected the channel, which is the line that runs the length of the underquilt here, made a big loop and come back to the secondary suspension, which is the adjustment. So what I'm going to do is loosen it all off, every single aspect of it, so we can really come to terms with how quick and easy it should be. And having separated my channel lines, it's not vital, but it allows it to ride over the top of the hammock rather than it being underslung. As a rule of thumb, I want the quilt to actually ride above the hammock. So I want this quilt up here above the hammock to the tune of about 2 fists, like that. I want to see a gap underneath, and as you can see I'm actually going to dial this in with a quilt on the outside of the hammock. Then I can put the hammock in. So I use the actual lifting mechanism on the quilt until it is 2 fists above the actual hammock. At this point, I don't even worry about the positioning of the quilt, whether it's too far up the head end, too far down the foot end. Well, that is step 2. Let's just get step 1 done, getting it to ride above the hammock. So after pulling on this part of the suspension here, I need to see if we have a clearance. I can see straight through. The next is to raise the foot and head end. As you can see, it's touching the hammock and I want it lifted off it, and I can adjust that on these toddles, which adjust the foot and head end. Now the quilt has some clearance. As you can see, it could do with cinching up here. Just use this toddle here, not to be confused with the secondary suspension toddle, which actually lifts the hammock underquilt in the air, and in our case, off the hammock. That's what we're looking for. So where my shoulder and head is going, I've moved the quilt further towards the head, and I've moved the quilt further towards my feet on this side, but notice the other side is further back. I do not achieve that goal by pulling anything on an attachment here. It is solely done by moving the actual fabric up and down this line. Let's assume I'm happy with the positioning of the quilt. It just needs locking off. I just do an overhand knot with the excess here. A quick release knot behind it. That will stop it slipping, and it will slip in the night. So you've seen how I lock it off, which is a bit like the first part of your shoelace, an overhand knot. It will come undone, don't worry about it, it's only elastic. If you're in any doubt, make a slippery half hitch, which instead of pulling all the line through is just a loop through a loop, as I've done here. But I need to do all 4 corners, and I'll show you what will happen if you don't. If I lift this up, watch how the quilt falls down. That would come off your butt and make you cold. I'll show that again. I'll pinch it right to the end and lift it up. You can see I've about 1.5 inches, which it is falling. That would fall in the middle. So just lock off each corner. Okay, it's pretty much there. Step 1, we lifted it 2 fists above the hammock, with the actual underquilt being fitted on the outside of the hammock, so we can see what's going on. Step 2, the adjustment of the quilt, moving it further along the line towards a foot or head end, a channel on a cord, move it along. Don't pull to try and stretch the fabric to the foot end. Move the actual material to stop all that from slipping in the night. I tied an overhand knot on each of the 4 corners. That should be pretty much it. I'm going to disconnect the actual underquilt, this time put the hammock in the quilt and get in. Now, I haven't tried it, it doesn't look right for me. I would actually have the quilt a lot further up the head end, maybe, but that is good enough. So, I want to disconnect the underquilt. and then wrap it around the hammock, come back and put it in to the aspina, start putting the hammock inside it, disconnect the other end, wrap it round, back to the suspension there. Hopefully it's ensured a good fit. I'm going to try that out in a minute, and I know it's got plenty of lift because we set it 2 fists higher than the hammock. I gathered the fabric of the hammock in my hand. I went 1-2 fists, so the underquilt is riding 2 fists above the hammock. I positioned it where I wanted it, then I tied an overhand knot in the corners. 3 rules to remember, and you've got yourself a good dialing it in, conforming it to the shape of your hammock. If you wondered what the hell I'm doing here, I am gagging for a brew. Assam traditional tea, builder's tea from the army ration pack, but I've got some coffee. I won't keep you a minute. Shooting going off up there. Have a whistle on my Cobra band here. I might need to blow that just to indicate that I'm here. Add in some real ground coffee. Real ground coffee just being housed in this kind of packet for now. Labelled coffee so I don't get it mixed up with the whitener and the sugar. Clean the old spoon. Had to move the lid over a little so it doesn't bubble over. So that in essence is how to ensure a good dial in on your underquilt, and I just haven't seen that information on YouTube. Now I could spend the next 10 minutes getting in the hammock, lying how I like, finding out if I've got enough fabric covering my feet and my shoulder, and adjusting it accordingly. Remember, pull the fabric along the elastic line, then lock it off. Don't use the little mechanism, the secondary and primary suspension, to pull the fabric. It's not what it's for. You have no idea, mate. You have no idea. This is awesome. So while I enjoy the rest of my coffee, I'm gonna fiddle about with my underquilt. Now once you've set your underquilt the way you like it and you've locked it off with a knot on the corners, that's it. That is your underquilt dialed in for that particular hammock. If I wanted to use a different hammock, I would do that process again. but it's going to take me about 10 minutes of getting in and out, adjusting it, tying them knots at the end when I'm happy with it, and that is it. And I wished there was a video like this when I first started out with my down underquilts, because I couldn't find that information at all. Take your time getting this adjustment right. It's not a race, it's going to be part of your hammock system. Enjoy the process. Little 3 steps. Remember, don't use the mechanism to pull the fabric. That's only to lift it off the hammock. With the hammock, of course, being dialed in on the outside, as we saw in the beginning. But once you get the hang of it, that is it. You can dial in any underquilt to any hammock. Until next time, you take really good care of yourself. Happy trails.